Hello everyone and welcome to this new lecture. Today we're going to talk about participles. It is very important to know participles in Latin because you find them all the time, and even in modern languages we use participles very frequently. So first of all, let's define what a participle is. So a participle can be defined as a verbal adjective, namely an adjective that comes from the verb, and also an adjective that has the properties of a verb. Since it is an adjective, it agrees in gender, number, and case with the noun it refers to. Since it is also a verb, the participle has tense. And Latin has three tenses for the participle: present, perfect, and future. Of course, the etymology is that it is called participle because it participates in the nature of the noun and of the verb. So basically the participle shares, takes part in a double nature. So do we have participles in English? Yes, of course we have them. But we just have the present and the past participle. Specifically, the present participle corresponds to the ing form of a verb. For example, if I say I saw a flying bird, so I saw a bird that was flying. So in this sentence, flying is the present participle. The past participle instead varies based on the nature of the verb, because if the verb is regular, you simply add ed at the end of the verb. So for example, play, played. But if it is irregular, the ending is not really predictable, and you just have to learn the third form of the principal parts of the verb. Let's take the example of write, write, wrote, written. And so the third is written. In the example, the Greeks had laws written on stone. So laws which were written on stone. So let's start from the present participle and let's see how it is constructed. So the present participle in Latin is constructed simply by adding ns, ntis to the stem of the verb. So I chose one verb for every conjugation. So first conjugation, amo, amans, amantis, moneo, monens, monentis, lego, legens, legentis. Potentially we also have the third conjugation I stem, for example, capio, we have capiens, capientis, and in the end, fourth conjugation, audio, audiens, audientis. The present participle is declined like a second-class adjective with one ending. So, for example, an adjective that we studied in the past of this kind is ingens, ingentis, which means big, enormous. So I will not read these forms because it's something that we have already studied, but I just put these tables if you wish to review how it works. The perfect participle is taken from the fourth principal part, and this declined like a first-class adjectives. So it has one ending for the masculine, one ending for the feminine, and one ending for the neuter. So let's take the third conjugation verb, legere. We have the principal parts, lego, legere, legi, lectus. So in order to get to form the perfect participle, you just take the fourth principal part, so lectus, and you add the endings of a first-class adjective. So the perfect participle is lectus, lecta, lectum. This is of course because it has to agree with the noun. We know first-class adjectives, but I included these tables in case you wish to review it. Let's go to the future participle, which is something that we do not have in English, for example. Well, actually, not even in Italian, but in Italian sometimes we have some crystallized forms which come from a Latin future participle. So the future participle is constructed by adding urus, ura, urum to the stem of the fourth principal part. and it is declined, as before, like a first-class adjective. So if we take rego, regere, rexi, rectus, which means to rule, it's a third conjugation verb. So we take the fourth principal part, rectus, and we add urusura urum. And so the result is recturus, rectura, recturum. So for example, in Italian, if you are talking about a baby who is about to be born, we use the verb nascituro, which is a future participle of the verb nascere, which means to be born. Even in Latin, to be born is nascor, so very similar to Italian, as usual. Here is the declension, even though we already know it. So your book also lists the future participle passive, but we will leave it aside for now, and we will study that when we do the gerund and the gerundive, and also the passive periphrastic. So for now, I just don't want you to study that. Let's go to the, I think the most difficult thing about participle, which is their usages. So every participle can be used with the substantive, attributive, and circumstantial use. So let's try to define all of the three. So the substantive is when the participle is used as a noun. The attributive is when the participle is used as an adjective and therefore describes some kind of quality or attribute. And circumstantial is when the participle is used as a verb and describes the circumstances under which an action occurs. And the circumstances described by this participle can be expressed with different types of clauses. For example, a temporal, a causal, a concessive, or a conditional clause. So now maybe these things are a little unclear, but we will explain them for every tense of the participle. Let's start with the present participle. So the present participle indicates an action which is simultaneous with the main verb. So if you have the main verb and the participle, it means that the two actions take place at the same time. The present participle, with no exceptions, always has an active meaning, and in English can be translated with an ing form or with a relative clause. When it is used in a circumstantial sense, this participle can be expressed with different types of clauses, as we said before. So let's see some examples, which makes things clearer, in my opinion. So let's start with the substantive use. So when a participle is used as a noun. So if I say Caesar regens erat, so regens is the present participle of regere, to rule. But in this case, it is used as a noun, so Caesar was a ruler. And that is why, even in English, we translate it with a noun, not with an ing form. Let's see the attributive use, so when it is used as an adjective. So the sentence is vidi puellam canentem. I saw a singing girl. Or I saw a girl who was singing. In this case, being someone who is singing is a sort of quality which is attributed to the girl. As you can see, the two actions take place at the same time. So I saw a girl who was singing at that time. So as you can see, you can translate it either with an ing form or with a relative clause. Let us see, for example, a circumstantial use. Caesar ciceronem videns eum salutavit. So Caesar, seeing Cicero, said hello to him. So basically, this sentence captures Caesar in the act of seeing Cicero. And so it is basically describing the action that Caesar is doing when he sees Cicero. And that is why we can translate it in a great variety of ways. We can use, for example, an ing form, as I said before. So Caesar, seeing Cicero, said hello to him. But we can also use a temporal clause. So Caesar, when he saw Cicero, once he saw Cicero, at the moment in which he saw Cicero, we can vary it in many ways, said hello to him. But we can also use a causal clause. Caesar, since he saw Cicero, said hello to him. In this case, the correct translation kind of depends on the context. And also, it can be a little bit subjective, so it also depends on your sensibility in some circumstances. So let us see the perfect participle. So differently from the present participle, the perfect participle indicates an action which is prior to the main verb. And also, another important difference is that the present participle has mostly a passive meaning. However, if the perfect participle is the one of a deponent verb, it has an active meaning, because we know that deponent verbs have passive forms but active meanings. And in this case, the perfect participle is no exception. It can be translated in English with a normal past participle, with a passive ing form, or with a relative clause. If its usage is circumstantial, you can use the many different types of clauses, as we saw before. So let us see some examples which will make things clearer. So let's see the substantive use. Victi pacem petierunt. So the defeated asked for peace. So in this case, victi is used as a noun, so those who had been defeated. So the defeated asked for peace. So you can use here a noun with an article. Let's see the attributive use, so when the participle is used as an adjective. Hannibal incendit urbem captam. So in this case, the best translation, like not the best, but maybe the easiest, is by using a simple past participle in English too. So Hannibal set fire to the captured city. If you wish to use a relative clause, you have to be careful, because the action has to take place before the action of the main verb. So Hannibal set fire to the city which had been captured. So the city was captured first and then set to fire. I think you can also use a passive ing form. So Hannibal set fire to the city having been captured. Let us see the circumstantial use. So Hannibal victus recedit. So even in this case, the best option is the one of using a simple past participle. So Hannibal, defeated, withdrew. But I can also use a passive ing form. So Hannibal, having been defeated, withdrew. If I choose to use some kind of clause, it is very subjective. In this case, for example, I can use a temporal clause. Hannibal, once he had been defeated, withdrew. But I can also use a causal clause. I think that this is suitable for this sentence. So Hannibal, since he had been defeated, withdrew. The only thing you have to be careful is that the action of the participle has to take place prior to the action of the main verb. So that is why we use in this case the past perfect. So since he had been defeated. Let's see, for example, a case in which we can use a concessive clause, since we didn't do that for the present participle. Hannibal victus tamen progressus est. So Hannibal, although he had been defeated, however, advanced. In this case, there is the adverb tamen, which helps you to understand that the best meaning here is the one of a concessive clause. So the concessive clause is although, even though, etc. Let us take an example with a deponent verb, which is a little problematic sometimes. So Caesar hortatus milites vicit. So Caesar, having encouraged his soldiers, won. So even if hortatus is a past participle, and so we can expect that it has a passive meaning, however, since we're dealing with a deponent verb, this meaning becomes from passive to active. And so the correct translation for, in this case, of hortatus is having encouraged and not having been encouraged. Translating a deponent with the passive form, as you know, is a mistake in Latin. Last thing is the future participle. It is not very problematic, even though we have to use different expressions because we don't have it in English. So the future participle indicates an action which is subsequent to the main verb. So it took place after. The future participle always has an active meaning. So it is not like the perfect participle, which you have to be careful whether it's a non-deponent verb or a deponent verb. So the future one has always an active meaning. Since we do not have the future participle in English, we have to use expressions such as about to or to be going to. Also joined, they can also be joined with a relative clause. Sometimes the future participle can also convey an idea of intention, but it depends on the context. When it is used in a circumstantial sense, we can use the types of clauses that we have seen before. Let's see some examples to clarify. So let's take the substantive use first, so when it is used as a noun. So this sentence was famously uttered by the gladiators in the arena before the beginning of a spectacle. So they went in front of the emperor and they said, Ave, Caesar, morituri te salutant. So, hail, Caesar, those who are about to die or those who are going to die salute you. So as you can see here, there are not many options. You have to use the expressions to be about to or to be going to. Another example, for example, is futura non scio. So I do not know the future. So literally, futura translates with the things that are about to be, the things that will be in the future. But this means basically the future. So that is why in English we can translate just with the noun, the future. Even in Italian you say futuro, which comes from this verb. The attributive use it is when the participle is used as an adjective. So I translated this, I took it as an example this noun phrase, animus Catilinae pugnaturi. So the courage of Catilina, about to fight, who is about to fight, who is going to fight. You could also translate who has the intention of fighting. So even here the translation is very subjective. The important thing is that you convey the idea of something that will happen in the future, will happen afterwards. I also listed one example of circumstantial use, even though you will not find the future participle very often, so I would worry more about the present and the perfect participle. So, Catilina, moriturus, tamen loqui conatus est. So, Catilina, although he was about to die, although he was going to die, although he was in the point of dying, however, he tried to speak. So here, for example, you have tamen, so the best, meaning is the one of a concessive clause. So participles, as you can see, can be a little tricky. I think that the best way to learn them is just to translate a lot of them. And I think that there will be a lot of opportunities to do that because Latin uses participle in a really very frequent way. So just some final remarks on some exceptions. So the verb sum only has the future participle. So futurus, futura, futurum. It doesn't have either the present nor the perfect participle. Because as you know, sum is a defective verb. So it lacks some forms. The verb possum has no participles, so you will never find the participle of to be able to. And another thing which is a little tricky is that the present participle of the verb eo is euns euntis. So it uses this root eu, which is one of the roots of the verb to go, which is also used for the future passive participle, eundus, eunda, eundum. But this is something that we will study in the future. Okay, I apologize if this lecture was a little long, but I wanted to prepare just a big comprehensive lecture on participles so that if you're uncertain about something, you can always go online and review the things that you need to. Thank you for listening, and I will see you in class.